Apple's current market value is valued at $165.29 a share, with a total market cap of $2.7 trillion. While this is the largest company that has ever existed to date on the stock market, it was originally started on 1976, April 1st. And no, it wasn't a prank, despite it trying to compete against giants who had been in the industry for 60 plus years. So, IBM, Microsoft, all those companies, what do they have that Apple doesn't? Well, one, they're not worth over almost $3 trillion. They're bigger than Bitcoin, Walmart, Target, Boeing, Coca-Cola, NFL, Nike, McDonald's, and Disney combined. So, how did they get here? Well, to understand that, we have to understand how the marketing wheel necessarily works. When we look at the pre-purchase model, famous that Nike made, due to the fact of branding themselves with athletes and how they represent themselves with commercials, showing their training, and not even ever really needing to establish the fact that it's Nike by putting massive logos, but just with the simple tagline of just do it. They've established a brand of credibility, of limited availability, and high quality. When we look at the purchase model, Gap ends up having massive quantities of shirts, clothing, and whatnot, so that it can fit anyone's needs. And then there's the post-purchase model, which Hyundai focuses on through guarantees and warranty deals that make anyone happy to buy their product and trust their consumer relationship. So, what Apple did, originally when it started out, it focused on the pre-purchase model, and I call this the pre-purchase era. If we look at their advertisements, the most famous ones being the 1984 advertisement with this lady throwing a sledgehammer through a giant television screen, it itself is a pop culture reference to 1984, the book by George Orwell. And because of the year and the release of this trailer, it's very cleverly done so that it's a pop culture reference. This in itself spun many more pop culture references and made self-advertising of Apple not even really needed to be pushed as like a sponsored product through Futurama, Simpsons, and Family Guy, who have all replicated this joke. Then there's the I'm a PC and I'm a Mac. This is famously done in 2005 and is a really clever idea due to the fact that, hey, I'm a PC and I'm a Mac. Because of this, despite the fact that a Macintosh is still fundamentally a personal computer, they were able to target their ads to fight against all their other competitors in this space and steal market share due to the fact that they're like, hey, I'm a Macintosh, and what makes me special is I'm created by Apple, and only by Apple. But in truth, the thing which makes Mac so different than most PCs is that they don't run on Windows, making it also a very clever jab at all Windows-based PCs and at Microsoft itself. Thanks to that, they're able to steal a lot of market share, establish themselves as a unique brand, and distinguish themselves away from their competition with funny and relevant ads. This is so famously successful that the I'm a Mac guy is currently doing advertisements for Intel with I'm a PC guy now. And while that was effective for the Verizon, can you hear me now, to Sprint, now you can hear me, the thing is, it has been much more effective for Apple than it will ever be for PC because of what they did and how they chose to market and label their products. So, outside of the pre-purchase model, they decided after more recently to focus on the purchase and post-purchase model. The reason why they did this is because, as you can see by the indexed Google search volume, Apple Store Near Me, which is highlighted in red, has become more and more popular as time has gone on. This is just an index of 2020 when we were all in the pandemic quarantine. So Church Near Me, drastic drop. Apple Near Me going above that even beyond because it has established itself as a household name and it doesn't really need to establish itself anymore through mass advertising. So Supermarket Near Me, Haircut Near Me, and Convenience Store Near Me are all subliminally lower due to the fact that Apple, for most people, it being a phone, it being a computer, it being an iPad, and the massive work-at-home crisis that happened, was much more relevant than, honestly, having a good haircut, despite how crazy it drove a lot of people. So, What did they do to get into the purchase era? Well, to describe that, their first store they ever opened was on Saks Fifth Avenue in New York City. This avenue is famous for having high luxury brands all across the avenue. Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Rolex, and then Apple. This glass dome, this sort of like temple to their own product. Very clever, very smart design. They chose this because, as Steve Jobs to put it, packaging can be theater. It can create a story. Very different from anything else done in the tech space. If you remember like old PCs back in the day, which I wasn't around for, unfortunately, they were all superimposed with all these details and all this extra nonsense that was very confusing for the consumer. What Steve Jobs and the company of Apple really innovated was sleek design. As we see with the top right, the bottom right, and the bottom left, they all have distinguishing, unique features about them. The top right shows what the iPhone looks like, shows what it would look like in your hand if you were to pick up the box and look at it directly in your face. The Apple Watch, sponsored with Nike, because of that combination, if you're a sports fan, it's a branding deal. It's something exotic. It's like, hey, I have the Apple Watch, and it's with Nike. And that's what makes them really purchase focused, because they're really smart with their branding and their identity. The Apple AirPods, you can't walk around, not see them, and not think, oh, that's Apple's. Those are Apple AirPods. Because all the other AirPods you see, all the other little earbuds that you see, they're not an AirPod. They're not an Apple one, at least. And they don't have that design. So they're unique. Then they focused on the post-purchase model, famously through their uses of the Genius Bar and through the blue and green text bubbles that you see. If I'm an Apple iPhone user, which I am, and I do have the phone, whenever I text someone, I always see that little green bubble, and I'm like, oh, if I'm headed over to the house, I know I have to bring my own charger because they don't have one for me. And because of that, I'm in that sort of locked-in cycle of Apple, iPhone to iPad to Macintosh over and over and over again, because I want to have all my data transfer between all my different points, and I can receive texts on my computer, which I can't do on my a PC or my laptop if I don't have a Macintosh, which allows me to text in class and all this other stuff. And because of that, Apple traps you in a cycle of loyalty, which is very clever and very genius, just like the Genius Bar, which has the highest record customer relations ever. So that is why their price point is almost $3 trillion, because of all these things and all these factors. Despite recessions, despite the death of Steve Jobs, and despite many other factors like huge margins on inflation and the reduction of it by the Fed more recently, it still remains as one of the most trusted company brands of all time. Interbrand rating it at a value of $400 billion just for the brand name alone. For more information, you can check out these sites, and thank you so much for listening to my TED Talk.